Hi all, I have another book to recommend to you today, The Best of Roger Zelazny. I would put this on a par with Philip K. Dick's writing, and if you're into science fiction, you know what that means. But I also have for you a treat spécial. I'm going to read to you a particular page, and this page touched me deeply as an engineer, and I'll explain to you why. But what all was involved in the thing? Lord, what wasn't? The computer that wasn't exactly a computer. Okay, well, start there. Last century, 3 engineers at the University of Wisconsin, Nordman, Parmenter, and Scott, developed a device known as a superconductive tunnel junction memristor, 2 tiny strips of metal with a thin insulating layer between them. Supercool it, and it passed electrical impulses without resistance. Surround it with magnetized material and pack and mass them together, billions, and what have you got? He shook his head. Well, for one thing, you've got an impossible situation to schematicize when considering all the paths and interconnections that may be formed. There's an obvious similarity to the structure of the brain, so they theorized you don't even attempt to hook up such a device. You pulse in data and let it establish its own preferential pathways by means of the magnetic materials becoming increasingly magnetized each time the current passes through it, thus cutting the resistance. The material establishes its own roots in a fashion analogous to the functioning of the human brain when it is learning something. In the case of the hangman, they used a very similar setup to this and were able to pack over 10 billion memristor-type cells into a very small area, around a cubic foot. They aimed for that magic figure because that is approximately the number of nerve cells in the human brain. That is what I meant when they said it wasn't really a computer. They were actually working in the area of artificial intelligence, no matter what they called it. Now that is from the story Home is the Hangman, published in November of 1975. So, why did I read that? What does that mean to me? Well, there's a certain crowd listening to this in the engineering world, or people who've had a coffee break with me, who know exactly what he's alluding to. The memristor. So, in 1971, Leon Chua, I'm sorry, I have no idea what the correct pronunciation of that is, but that's my best guess. He published a really groundbreaking paper, or it was thought so at the time, called Memristor, the Missing Circuit Element. Now, what is this memristor? Well, it's a portmanteau of memory and resistor. And as you can see from section 2, it is the 4th basic circuit element. Personally, I would contest this, but it is a very interesting paper nonetheless. The key to understanding the memristor is this equation. So M, the memristance, is equal to the change in flux by the change in charge. Well, hang on now, that's very similar to a resistor, which is the change in voltage by the change in current. So you can see that this flux is actually analogous to voltage, and this charge is actually analogous to current. However, by putting it in this kind of phrasing, it suggests something. It suggests that there is a constant term which has memory, it kind of lasts. So the memristor is kind of like a resistor, except its resistance isn't fixed. It changes if you leave a current pulse, and it can be changed back by pulsing current the other way. This is very special to me because memristors were my first love in engineering. During COVID, I did my first master's dissertation project, and obviously we couldn't access the lab, so this was based on simulating memristors. And I didn't learn about memristors in my studies. I I was very interested in learning what was really going on with them. So you can see this arrangement here. We have two metal plates and some kind of darker region and this lighter region, and this barrier is kind of shifting. So you can imagine that if you allow the current to keep flowing, this sort of darker area will diffuse out over the whole thing, and if you force current the other way, all of these darker charged particles are kind of going to bunch up at the top there. And I did a lot of work on how you might arrange this with a memristor, which is this sort of square line, and the resistor, which is just the sort of standard diagonal line. The symbol here is actually Chuan's original symbol, but most people draw it like this because the figure of 8 is a lot easier to draw. And I had some scheme worked out where I can work out the optimal resistance with for this divider to give the best voltage range. That's not very interesting. This is the scheme that I kind of designed. Now this is not the optimal scheme for this. This is accessing one cell at a time. These are the memristor cells, and reading output and setting them individually. This is not how you'd want to do it. So Chua came up with this idea of the memristor, but he had no idea how to make it. Because of the way he kind of derived it, he thought it was going to be some magnetic device. It would be the magnetic flux that would cause this memristive mechanism to occur. He was wrong. It's actually oxygen vacancies drifting inside a very thin film material, because this has to be quite small, this area. And by putting arrays of them together like this, you can basically connect each one, and by pulsing the rows and columns differently, you can connect to each individual memristive cell. In 2008, Hewlett-Packard actually made a memristor using this so-called crossbar configuration. And there's some other companies that do something similar. They don't use the word memristor. I wish they would. It would make things a lot easier, because you can see that these devices are similar. What I'm doing is really a recommendation, not a review. I'm not going to review each one. I will say that it talks about, well, I'll just read the blurb. From the far reaches of space to the hidden corners of the earth, from aliens to wizards and everything in between. That's not an accurate view of this book. This is sci-fi, etc., and one fantasy story at the end. So don't expect an even mix of both. But they are all excellent stories. It's not a sort of typical fantasy. It's somehow more real and credible feeling, if you can believe that. That's all from me. I hope you've enjoyed this little insight into my history with memristors. I'll see you next time.